Hello, I'm Brian Costello, and welcome to the Teacher's Journey podcast, where we talk with some of the best educators around about learning and life as they share the stories that made them the educators they are today.
You're going to be on video, so usually on Zoom. Okay.
Welcome back once again to the Teacher's Journey podcast. My guest tonight is someone who's had an enormous impact on my career over the past year. I've learned so much from her and the things that she's doing, and I'm really excited to have her share her story and kind of give some new perspectives on the teacher's journey tonight. So thank you, Jaime Donally, for joining me on the podcast.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me. What an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, well, the honor is mine. Absolutely. So it's amazing because I feel like there are so many things that people might know you for, and there's so many facets to what you do, and I'm curious, how did you get started? So where did you start? Finally, say like you started as a teacher. So when did you say to yourself, "I'm going to be a teacher"?
You know what? I actually didn't think I was ever going to be. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I was a terrible student. Not bad behavior, just did not have any ambition to do well. So I did pretty much the bare minimum just to pass, and didn't really have like somebody saying, hey, that's unacceptable, or, you could do so much better than that. So mediocre was acceptable. So I didn't really think I was, I didn't really think that I was capable of being a teacher, I suppose. And then later on, got married when I was in college, which college was purely because I wanted to play college sports. So I went in with a volleyball scholarship and played basketball and softball with the small Christian university in California. So it was perfect because that was my goal and my objective and what I was doing. And then got married and had kids. And then it was like, okay, let me start working on this master's degree because I want to homeschool my kids. I want to make sure I'm prepared. So I imagine myself as a homeschool parent. And it was not very long before I realized very quickly when my son was probably 2 that I'm so not qualified to teach him everything he needs to be taught, everything he was needing. So I was like, okay, well, that's not for me. What's the second option here? Because he needs real teachers. And then I started kind of finishing up my program, and in the process of going through the program, I had to do some student teaching, just like all of us have to do, right? Yeah. And in the student teaching, I went into a classroom. I'll remember it was out by UC Davis in California. But I went into a classroom and did a twister game with math. And so the kids had to solve math problems. They were going on this twister game. And I just remember feeling like, I don't ever want to leave. Why can't I just stay in here? Because I was working in the office at the school district doing secretarial, like registrar stuff. And so I'm like, this is crazy. This is where I want to be. So when I finished my program, I was actually here in Texas and started teaching. And I love it. I still love it. I honestly think about going back to the classroom all the time because I love working with kids. And more importantly, I feel like you get to be this crazy person of who you really are that maybe you don't show everybody all the time, but in front of your students, you're just you and you get paid to do it. So I've dressed up as a clown and I've had crazy games and activities. Everything's very hands-on, but that's how I function. So my classrooms are very active, engaged, learning, just crazy. So short story, really, is that I didn't plan to become an educator. And when I started teaching math, it was the only subject I felt qualified to teach. And it really has never been about a subject. So it's always been about the relationships I have with my students. And then when the opportunity went into technology, which was, again, this passion that kind of built up as I was using it in the classroom, and then eventually had the opportunity to go and work in a district and went to a couple different districts. And then instructional technology just felt like another piece of this passion of what I love doing, but more importantly, was never about the technology. It was always about the people.
So
And
I'm
so,
gonna stop you for a second
yeah,
because we're warping through your entire career right now,
yeah, that's
which is
it.
really cool because I just got this like super quick backstory, and I love that you you figured out you wanted to be a teacher when you went into a classroom and started teaching. I pretty much did the same thing, except I wasn't even teaching. I was just like helping direct crying children to their classrooms. Uh, but like lost first graders on the first day of school. And I was just like, I need to be here. So this is phenomenal. um, so
Yeah.
it, you taught math and you had some engaging activities and you were like really interested in building those relationships and having fun. And I want to know, so when you first started actually teaching and you were the teacher and there wasn't anybody else who was responsible, uh, how did that go and what was it like? I mean, when you closed the door in your classroom on the first day, what did you feel? What were you thinking? Because uh, it's a tough thing the first time you actually have to be teaching kids and be responsible and be the person who does it all.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just hoping nobody cussed at me and started fighting. I grew up in public school in California in the Bay Area. So my first day of teaching was in Texas in a small, like rural area. And the students were, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And finally I stopped one. I was like, what? Why are you saying that to me? First day of school, kid you not. They're like, because we're supposed to. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe this is a lot easier
Carry
than I
on.
thought. But I think going into it, I was terrified. I thought I was going to make a ton of mistakes with math, and I thought everybody was going to disqualify me as being legitimate in the classroom. But it wasn't very long before I realized, like, being human is part of building those relationships and letting the students know that I make just as many mistakes as they do, that we're going to work together, move forward. I think that just alleviated so much of the pressure that a lot of teachers face.
Yeah. And so you had also mentioned, doing some different things in your classroom. And I'm wondering, when you first started that, when you started, dressing up or playing games or bringing more interactive pieces into your math instruction, what kind of pushback did you get from people who were basically like, this is not how you teach class? Did you find that happening? Did you come across that? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I've always been a lone wolf, I think, in a lot of ways. Things that I get excited about, I just kind of run with it. And if you catch up, great. If you don't, or, I kind of go off on these tangents. The students obviously don't give any pushback. They are just absolutely hungry for opportunities to be engaged. I think some of it, though, is really validating. Is this something that is providing learning, or is it just fun? So is this video really, so you start off kind of going in this direction. You're following the footsteps of what you've always been taught school should look like. And then you start going off and doing something different. And then it's like, well, this seems like a lot of fun. I'd like that. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've learned anything. It just means that I've provided in a different way. So my first year teaching, I was a rock star. And those kids passed that test and they did so well and they were so excited. And then the next year I follow up with some of them and they're like, oh, I hate math this year in 7th grade. It stinks. I don't understand anything. I wish you were back. And I was like, Jamie, you are just incredible. I think it was like by my 4th year that I realized I was no rock star, that I crutched those kids. I was teaching them all these little tricks and funsies. And in the end, those kids were not prepared for the next year. Should have been, instead of patting myself on the back, I should have realized that I really hurt those kids from excelling because I wasn't doing foundational work with them. I was just teaching them the tricks to pass the test. So I think in the end, there's times where I've made lots of mistakes on the directions that I go, But at the same time, I had to take those risks to know what worked and what didn't. And the students were gracious with me, and they were eager and excited too. I've learned a lot. And unfortunately, I think all of us teachers can say when we kind of just screwed up to those kids, like, and I could have done so much better. But I've had a chance to talk to them since, even as adults now, and just validate the fact that, I wasn't a great teacher. We had a great time. We had fun. There were some things maybe I did right, but in a lot of ways I hurt you guys from excelling in the future. So, and there, I think that's the cycle we all go through. It's just consistently learning to grow and push forward.
I think you make a really good point there about making sure that kids are ready are actually getting something out of fun. So it's great that they're having fun. It's great that they're engaged in something, because they do need that. But to make those activities meaningful for them I think that's a skill that comes with time. So I always felt like we were having fun. But I think for my kids, especially my first year, if they learned in spite of me, not necessarily because of me. Like they learned just because they were kindergartners, and they were going to learn, as long as I didn't, bar them from it, they were going to learn a whole lot. But so I think that's a good point, is that fun, while fun is really great, it's also important to have substance behind it, and to combine those two, to marry those two is a skill that the best teachers are gonna be able to put together, but it takes time. So at some point you realized that you were doing this, like you figured out how to put those things together. So what was that like when you realized that I can put together substance and engaging, enjoyable activities?
Yeah, I think it was year 4 for me. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I was in a training, and it was a foundational math training. I don't know exactly why it was that aha moment for me, but I remember standing out talking to our instructional coach out in the parking lot afterwards, and I was like, I have had it all wrong the whole time. But I'm very much a foundational, like when I coach sports, I love teaching the foundation. I think, we talk about AR, VR. I like teaching like why we're doing what we're doing, teaching the foundational core of like, what does this mean? And then we bridge off and do this exciting stuff. But like, that's, I think, always been in me. But I think it was that moment that it made me realize like, oh, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. Like these kids would have never been able to get this because I didn't teach them how to get there. I just taught them how to answer that question. So yeah, I think, it's sad because I don't think that I did everything wrong, but I don't think I taught depth the way that I really needed to, especially the kids that were really behind. So looking back, I wish I would have changed things, but that's when I also started my journey into RTI and working with kids that had not passed and failed. And it was fantastic. I feel like I whether we got them up to grade level or not, I felt like they were prepared to move forward because they had the foundation, and it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, that's totally understandable too, because it's not an easy thing to put together, and building the foundations for kids can be really challenging. But doing it in a way that's engaging is especially for those kids who are in need of those foundations and missed those along the way. I think that's really meaningful for them, because they don't typically, when you think of when you see RTI programs, when you see foundational programs, they are not fun. They are very, very straightforward. This is your skill. This is your thing. This is like, do this, do this, do this. Here's this set of specific interventions, end of story. And so to make those things engaging and enjoyable is really important, because those are the kids that have already kind of started to dislike what they're doing, disliking learning, feeling
right.
that learning is not enjoyable, and so making it so is really valuable. So I want to move back to the future now. So you moved into instructional technology, and then at some point made the decision to leave the classroom. So talk about what prompted the decision for you to step away from the classroom, and what was that like for you not being in the classroom anymore?
I think that there's somewhat of an identity crisis for everybody that goes and decides to transition out of the classroom, because I see way too many people doing it because they're burnt out, and I was quite the opposite. As a matter of fact, I applied for the position in instructional technology 2 years before and didn't get it, but I stayed in touch with the people in the district. And throughout those 2 years, they had reached out to me when the position became open, and they said, hey, you should apply. And it was like something inside of me really, and I still do, I love sharing on instructional technology. So I knew that piece of me was not being out there doing that. But on the other hand, I had to sit back and say, but I'm so comfortable with where I'm at. Like, I'm okay. What I get to do in RTI it's like a hidden secret for educators. They think they have it rough. No, I have small class sizes. I have no restrictions. We're looking at growth. We're not looking at everybody having to meet this, and it was just like beautiful. Like, why would I want to leave this? But when I was doing that, I think whenever I get to that point where I'm comfortable, I think that's when I start questioning, like, something's about to change. Like, that's not in my nature. I like kind of being risky. And so I think that's when I was like, okay, well, I'm going to apply and see where this goes and if this works out. And, I loved going into the classroom. I think that's another thing. Instructional technologists or coaches or whatever role that person is playing on, with the teachers, is still getting a chance to get in there and invest into those kids. It wasn't about necessarily investing into the kids at every moment. It was really investing into the educators. But I felt like a cheerleader, just like I was for my students, right? It was like, you can do this. I believe in you. But I felt like a cheerleader because I remember what it was like feeling overwhelmed and just monotonous stuff all the time when you don't have time to actually spend on the things you need to spend on with the kids. And so that's when I was, I spent majority of my time, even though, yes, I was teaching them technology, or yes, I was bringing resources. I spent a lot of time pushing them, but I spent a lot of time acknowledging them, spent a lot of time affirming them that I believe in them. I spent a lot of time reminding them that why they were there, and not to lose track of that, because all these other things will take away your attention from why you've begun doing what you're doing. So on some hand, it was like mentorship.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here shaking my head, like, you can't see this because this is an audio podcast, but you can imagine me shaking my head up and down a whole lot, almost like the room is shaking, because my role right now is very similar to that, where I work with the kids and I love the relationships that I get to build with them, but I'm also really trying to make the things that I do each year more obsolete, so that the next year I have to do something more to step out more, because I want the teachers to be able to take over as much of the basic technology integrated stuff that they can. And each year that I see it, I'm excited to see them do more, but I'm also reminded that, yeah, they have a lot on their plate, and they have a lot of things that are monotonous, and all the requirements that they get, and those things that are taking away from some of the things that they'd much rather be doing. So I try to make sure that I can help them infuse that into their classroom. So I just can't agree enough about those things that you were talking about. So you're as an instructional technologist, and now obviously working with Who Knew It, you're giving back a lot to people. And one of the things that I find really amazing about everything that you're doing, is between your work with Global Maker Day, between AR, VR, and EDU, and your website, and the chat, and the discussions we have on Voxer and Twitter, and the book you have coming out from ISTE with Learning Transported. All those things are just more ways that you are giving back to teachers. And I think that, to me, stems from that feeling that you were talking about, where you see the difficulty, you see the how hard it is sometimes for people to be able to use things that are engaging and exciting and also valuable learning. And so I just can you kind of talk a little bit about what motivates you at this point in your career to keep giving back, and how do you find new ways? Because I feel like you've found multiple ways to give back to teachers, to give back to the profession, really, which as I've written about and I've talked about, is for me one of the highest forms of being a master teacher.
I feel like I get as much as I receive. So that's not what I mean. I give as much as I receive. That's what I mean.
There we go. Yeah. You also get as much as you receive. I mean, that's also true. Yeah.
This is where I think that the dynamic for myself and my personality, working from home, not being in direct contact with people, the ambassador program, for who knew it, and connecting with educators was a huge piece that I had to acknowledge for myself, going from being in front of people all the time, right? Being in the district, you're never by yourself. I mean, if you're ever in your office very long, you start to kind of go crazy. But in the end, it's like, I look back and I'm like, man, this is, being at home sounds like this dream job until you're here for a few days and it starts to get quiet and boring. And, do I have to sit here all day and keep doing this? So the people that I connect with, for me, is well beyond just an investment that I'm giving to somebody, but really receiving the benefit of connecting with other people and learning from them. And, we are in a time where it's so easy to make these connections. So meeting people all over the world, I feel like the events that I've been a part of, the things that we're doing, there's just no boundary anymore, both in our collaborations as well as connections that we can connect and talk. To be honest, Brian, I don't even know where you live. I don't even know what state you're in. And that's what's crazy, is I don't have to know. It's kind of like, you probably don't know what state I'm in. I know we're in separate time zones because you mentioned Eastern time. But, and I know you're somewhere on that East Coast, but, in the end, it's kind of like we're all in this big bubble now together. And there's so much to learn and grow from one another. So I'm growing so much by being connected to the people like you and like that author group. I've learned so much in that group, and all the Voxer groups and Twitter chats and everything else. Even getting prepared to deliver things, and I'm sure you can relate to this. You're getting prepared to go and give PD, or you're going to provide training in some way, shape, or form. For me, getting prepared for the AR, VR, and EDU chat, it keeps me current. It forces me to have to invest into knowledge. So I'm learning in that, so when I'm prepping for conferences or getting things together for the book or whatever it might be, it's ultimately like I'm continuing to learn. I'm not getting disconnected.
And I'd say the two sessions I have to redo the most frequently when I go to give them are my AR VR session, because every time I go to do it, there's stuff that I have to change, and YouTube. Those two things are always changed. They are always changing. Every time I give one, because they're usually a few months apart, I have to go back through and redesign everything. Not entirely.
I can't even tell you how many AR. I was going to say, I can't believe how many AR VR presentations I have saved in Google Drive. You would not believe it. Like, I can never find the last one because I'm like, there's a million on here. I totally agree. It's those topics, I think, ever changing, which keeps you excited. And for me, that's what keeps my interest. But at the same time, it's constant. It's a constant wave of learning.
Absolutely. So Jaime, I really loved hearing your story. I loved hearing how you've continued to grow and change over the course of your career. And, you've touched on a lot of really good things, and you have so many good things to offer educators out there, from, AR, VR to different ways to engage learners in the classroom, to your experiences with RTI. And I think there's just a whole lot of knowledge there that you get to share with people. So one of the things that I try to focus on is when we talk about these journeys, we talk about how, how can we help people, and what would be helpful for others. So when you think of something that has helped you throughout your career, if you were going to give advice to a teacher, either a new teacher or even just a teacher who's kind of lost their fire, they've lost their steam, because I know there are a lot of teachers out there who are, whether it be rapidly or slowly, they burn out, they lose their steam. So what would you say to those people? What advice would you give them to really keep them, to get them back to, you mentioned at the beginning or earlier how you remind teachers of why they're there. So how would you do that for people?
Just had a friend kind of go through a situation where he was losing steam for sure. And we were on Voxer. And one of the things that I recommended, because I know for myself, when I start to feel overwhelmed with a lot of things, and we talked about this as well, but, really like eliminating all the million other distractions that you might have. And taking time to do something that you love doing, not because it's for work, not because it's for anything. I mean, for me, my husband has been in ministry, and that burns you out very quickly because you're constantly giving to people and you feel like you're just constantly being tore down, and when he was doing ministry, I started to feel very overwhelmed with instructional technology, doing everything I was doing. And I started painting. I mean, I don't know how to paint, but I found so much enjoyment, and it was for me, and it just cleared my mind. And when I was finished with the painting, it was like, all right, let's move on. So I would do a painting every couple of years. I mean, it's crazy. But I think the thing about it is, whether it's ed tech, whether it's, an art, whether it's just getting outside. For me, getting outside is a big thing.
Yeah.
Getting fresh air, seeing the sun, like I have to have that. So those types of things, I think investing back into yourself and not letting yourself get so burnt out in all of the demands, that we tend to close ourselves in, and we tend not to have those conversations with people. And I think that's where we fail, because whether or not those people are trustworthy enough to really listen to you, I don't know. But I think we fail ourselves because we try to pretend like it's not there. And then finally, it's like this crazy problem that you're ready to get out of teaching altogether. So I think that there's some things that the person needs to do in reaching out and connecting with friends. But two is really begin to do things that are maybe outside of the profession. Maybe it isn't, but taking some time to invest back into you, and then regroup and come back,
And that's incredible. And I mean, I think that's fantastic advice. I can't agree more with the idea that you find those things that you love, those things that can release some of the frustrations or the overwhelmed feelings, and let a lot of the other stuff go. Learning to say no is such a hard thing for most teachers. And I think that's one of those pieces that gets them burned out. One of the time periods I write about is that period between when that period where you think you kind of know what you're doing, and then the period where you know what you're doing, and that transition. And when you start to get it, people start to ask you if you'll do stuff for them. And you feel like, yeah, let's say yes to this, and let's say yes to that, and I'll say yes to this. And then all of a sudden you realize I can't do all this stuff because I can't do all this stuff. Or you think you can do all this stuff and you do all of it not well, or it kills you, and you need to learn how to say no to things that aren't what you love. And I think that's such good advice. So, and then reinvesting in yourself and your own wellness and your own health. And I see that as a positive movement recently, but I think it needs to be invested in as a profession, like across the profession, in much more comprehensive way. So, great advice from Jaime Donally. Great experiences that she shared with us. Jaime, before we sign off for the night, can you just let people know, how to get in touch with you, how to, where they can find your book, because there's going to be so many great resources in there for AR and VR and immersive technologies. So share just how people can get in touch with you and where they can find what the great resources that you share.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, first off, for saying everything that you have said. I value your input so much when you're joining into the communities. You bring one is you're still in the classroom. That is very different than many people because they're just really disconnected sometimes, like I feel myself getting to be at times as well. But in light of that, this community is just fantastic. So many talents. And so being part of the AR, VR, and EDU community has been just a wonderful privilege. So starting AR, VR, and EDU a couple years ago was, something that I wasn't quite ready to jump in wholeheartedly for, but inside of this community, it's so addicting. So if you want to chat on Twitter, you can do hashtag ARVRINEDU. And I have a website that is also arvrnedu.com. And that will have a lot of the information. I'm actually going to start compiling the information that we cover on chat in various ways and start pulling in that information. Just going to be moving forward with EdSurge and doing a lot more posts with them, become a columnist. So you'll start seeing a lot of posts with EdSurge under the AR, VR, and EDU concept and bringing that to the classroom. So Learning Transported will come out next month, April 10th. And I feel like it could be outdated in May, right? But
that's only a
regardless,
couple weeks
I know. And it really is a foundation. So giving teachers from beginner to expert some tools that they can bring back and use it in their classroom and share it with teachers and getting people to get on the immersive technology train. So yeah, that's lots of different places you can go get information. I think even following the chat on Twitter, incredible resources from companies, from people like you that are posting what they're doing, that you can get connected with a lot of amazing people as well.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us tonight and look forward to more amazing things coming from Jaime Donally in the future. Again, I just can't say enough about our guest, Jaime Donally, this evening. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Jaime's been such an inspiration for me in my own learning over the past year or so, and I'm thrilled that she joined us to share her journey. Check out her book, which hits stores today, Learning Transported. It's today, April 10th. You can find that on Amazon or anywhere else books are sold. Hope everybody enjoyed the journey. We'll catch you on the next one. And follow us on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else podcasts are listened to.